Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Jacob Miller stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his navy blue jacket. The light from the table lamp reflected in the glass, emphasizing the slight stubble on his chin and the weariness in his brown eyes. He was 38, but in recent months he had felt older. His job at an engineering firm was exhausting. He ran his hand through his short dark hair, trying to give it some order, and glanced at his watch. 18:15. It's time to go out. Emily was sitting on the sofa in the living room. Her long blonde hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she was holding a glass of red wine in her hands. She was wearing a loose white blouse and jeans, the typical evening attire for a woman who had spent the day on her laptop, sorting out presentations and calls. Emily worked as a marketer for a large company, and her career had been taking off over the past 2 years. She looked up from her phone, noticing Jacob walk by, tying the laces of his black shoes. "Where are you going?" she asked, smiling slightly. She sounded more curious than suspicious, but something in her tone made Jacob freeze for a second. He straightened up, pulled on his jacket, and turned to her, feigning a slight smirk. "Business meeting. A new client wants to discuss a project. Nothing interesting, just a couple of hours of talking about drawings and deadlines." Emily narrowed her eyes, taking a sip of wine. Her blue eyes studied him carefully, as if she was trying to catch something behind his words. "In the evening? On Wednesday?" She put the glass on the coffee table and crossed her arms. "Usually you have such meetings during the day, in the office, with coffee and boring slides." Jacob shrugged, trying to look casual. He walked to the coat rack by the door, took off his coat, and slung it over his arm. "This guy is some big shot from Detroit. I like restaurants and booze more than conference rooms." He said he wanted an informal atmosphere. "You know how it goes." Emily nodded, but her smile became a little forced. She stood up from the sofa, barefoot, and walked towards him, stopping a couple of steps away. Her scent, a light floral perfume with a hint of vanilla, wafted towards him, and for a moment Jacob felt a pang of nostalgia. He had once associated the smell with their first dates, with long walks around the University of Illinois campus, with her laughing at his awkward jokes. "Can I come with you?" she asked, tilting her head to the side. "You sometimes take me to such meetings." "Remember when we went to that contractor in Lake Forest? We finished with dinner overlooking the lake. It was fun." Jacob froze, holding his coat in his hands. He didn't expect this question. Emily usually didn't insist, especially in recent months when her own schedule had gotten busier due to business travel. But now there was something in her voice, not exactly insistence, but rather a desire to test his reaction. He forced himself to laugh, hoping it would sound natural. "Well, my mistress will be against it," he said with a wink. "Although, I'll ask her. Maybe she wouldn't refuse something interesting for the three of us." Emily rolled her eyes, but her lips twitched into a smile. She was used to his sarcasm. It was their little tradition, jokes on the edge that once brought them together. She slapped him on the shoulder, stepping back. "Very funny, Miller. Okay, go to your mistress. And I'll stay here, watch some series about murder and betrayal. Maybe I'll even find some inspiration. Just don't get too carried away," he said over his shoulder, opening the door. "Otherwise, you'll start to suspect me of something like that." "It's too late," she replied with feigned seriousness, returning to the sofa. "I already think that you are hiding a secret laboratory in the basement." Jacob chuckled, closing the door behind him. Her voice, light and playful, still rang in his ears as he walked down the stairs to the garage. But something tightened inside him. He didn't lie to her completely, he actually went to the meeting. Only this was not a business meeting, and he had no idea what awaited him. Jacob's car, an old gray Ford Focus, purred quietly as he drove through the suburban streets of Chicago. The houses around were the same two-story, with neat lawns and lanterns that were already lit at dusk. Spring came late this year, and the April air was cold, with a hint of dampness. He turned on the radio, but immediately turned it off. The news about traffic jams and politics only irritated him. He needed to focus. There was a letter in his jacket pocket. He found it in the morning, stuffed into a mailbox, without a stamp or return address. An ordinary white envelope, inside printed text on a 4-sheet. If you want to learn something new about your wife, come to the Blue Haven restaurant on Michigan Avenue today at 7 p.m. The place is crowded. Don't be afraid, I won't harm you physically, but I can't vouch for your mental state. Jacob read it 10 times that day. At first I thought it was someone's stupid joke, but something in the tone of the letter, in this strange mixture of threat and promise, hooked him. He didn't tell Emily. I didn't want to look paranoid. And what would he say? Hey, dear, they write to me here that you have secrets. He turned onto the highway, heading toward the city center. The Blue Haven was a hip place. Jazz, expensive food, crowds of tourists and locals who wanted to appear cooler than they were. Jacob had been there a couple of times, but he didn't like such establishments. Too noisy, too many people. But if the author of the letter chose this particular place, it means that he did not want to remain unnoticed. Or did he want Jacob to feel safe? Damn, what am I getting myself into? He muttered, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. The traffic light ahead turned red, and he stopped, looking at the traffic. Questions were swirling in my head. Who could have written this? And what could he possibly know about Emily? She was his wife for 7 years. He knew her habits, her favorite coffee, her way of frowning when she was angry. Or didn't you know? Meanwhile, Emily sat on the sofa with her legs tucked under her. The glass of wine was already half empty, and footage of some detective show was flashing on the TV screen. She turned it on in the background, but did not watch. Her thoughts were elsewhere. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her messages. Nothing interesting, a couple of work emails, a reminder about a meeting with a client tomorrow. She sighed and leaned back on the couch. A business meeting then, she said out loud, addressing the empty room. In a restaurant. In the evening. It wasn't that she didn't trust Jacob. It was as reliable as an old truck, not always the fastest, but it would always get you there. But something in his behavior today seemed strange to her. He left too quickly, laughed it off too easily. Normally, he would have stuck around, chatted with her about work, complained about the boss, and then once, and he's gone. Emily stood up, walked to the window, and looked out onto the street. The garage was empty, the car had driven away. She stood there for a minute, looking at the darkening sky, then returned to the sofa and picked up the remote control. Okay, she muttered, let him have fun. She turned on the next episode of the series, but her eyes kept returning to the phone. Something told her that this evening would not be as simple as she thought. Jacob parked 2 blocks from the Blue Haven. He got out of the car, pulled on his coat, and breathed in the cold air. The street was busy, people were rushing home, tourists were taking pictures of skyscrapers, and a horn was blaring somewhere in the distance. He put his hands in his pockets and walked towards the restaurant. It was warm and noisy inside the Blue Haven. A jazz quartet played something melancholic, waiters scurried between tables, and the smell of steaks and wine hung in the air. Jacob looked around, trying to figure out where to go. The letter said, table in the corner by the window. He spotted it, a small table for 2, overlooking Michigan Avenue. There was no one behind him. He sat down, took off his coat, and laid it on the back of the chair. The clock showed 18:55. The waiter came over almost immediately. What will you order? He asked, a young guy with a tight smile. Only water for now, Jacob answered. I'm waiting for someone. The waiter nodded and left. Jacob leaned back in his chair, looking out the window. The lights of the city were reflected in the glass, and he found himself thinking that he felt like the hero of some cheap thriller. Maybe this is really a joke. Maybe now one of his friends will appear with a stupid grin and say, Gotcha, Miller. But at 19 o'clock, a man appeared at the door, tall, with a short beard. He looked around the hall, noticed Jacob, and headed towards him. Jacob's heart began to beat faster. Are you Jacob Miller? The man asked, stopping at the table. His voice was low, with a slight hoarseness. Yes, Jacob answered, tense. Who are you? The man sat down opposite him without taking off his cloak. He looked Jacob in the eyes and said, My name is Nathan Crow. It was I who wrote you a letter, and believe me, you better order something stronger than water. Are you serious? Is this some kind of prank? Because if you do, you picked a bad day and the wrong guy, buddy. Nathan shook his head, his lips twitching into a weak smile, not cheerful, but rather bitter. I wish it were so. But no, Jacob, this is not a joke. Jacob narrowed his eyes, feeling irritation begin to boil inside him. He didn't like it when people spoke in riddles. Listen, Nathan, or whatever your name is, he began, leaning a little closer. You wrote me this damn letter, dragged me here, and now you're sitting there with your face like you just lost your car at poker. Be straight, or I'm leaving. Nathan nodded as if he had been expecting this. He raised his hand, beckoning the waiter, and called over his shoulder. 2 whiskeys. Jack Daniels, clean. And hurry up, boy, we're having a midlife crisis for 2. The waiter, the same young guy with a tight smile, nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Jacob leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Whiskey, you mean? Do you think I'll stay here drinking with you without even knowing who you are? Oh, you'll stay, Nathan said, looking into his eyes, because I know your wife, Emily. And I don't just know, I was her lover. The words hung in the air like smoke from a cigarette that someone forgot to put out. Jacob froze. His brain tried to process what he heard, but instead it produced only dull noise, like a radio with a bad signal. He opened his mouth to say something, but Nathan raised his hand. Wait, let me finish before you decide I'm crazy and call the cops. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out his phone. A few taps of the screen, and he handed it to Jacob. There was a photograph on the screen. Emily, his Emily, standing in some bar, holding a glass of wine. She was laughing, her blonde hair falling over her shoulders, and Nathan sat next to her, his arm around her waist. The date in the corner of the photo is last October. Jacob felt his stomach tighten. What is this? Photoshop? He squeezed out, although his voice sounded hoarse, as if someone was squeezing his throat. You could have taken her photo from social networks and... I could, Nathan interrupted, picking up the phone. But then how to explain this? He showed the following photo. Emily in a hotel room, in a robe, with disheveled hair, drinking coffee from a white cup with the Hilton logo. In the background is Nathan, wearing only jeans, standing by the window. Date December. Jacob recognized the robe. Emily brought the same one back from one of her business trips to Milwaukee and said she stole it from the hotel for comfort. And here's another thing, Nathan added, scrolling further. This is us in a restaurant in Milwaukee. By the way, she likes rare steaks. Jacob looked at the screen, and each new frame was like a punch in the gut. He recognized her smile, the way she tilted her head when she laughed. It was her, his wife, with this bearded bastard who was now sitting opposite him and looking at him with some strange sympathy. You're lying, Jacob said, but there was no confidence in his voice. She wouldn't. She's on a business trip, works. She has projects, presentations. Yes, she's a master at telling stories, Nathan nodded. She also sang to me about her lonely life. She said she was divorced and lived in Milwaukee for work. I believed it, until he found the ring and shook the truth out of her. The waiter returned, placing 2 glasses of whiskey on the table. The amber liquid splashed, reflecting the light of the lamps. Nathan picked up his glass and took a sip, wincing. Drink, he said. You need this. Jacob grabbed the glass, almost spilling it, and drank it in one gulp. The burning sensation in his throat was more pleasant than what was going on in his head. He set the glass down on the table with a loud thud and glared at Nathan. Let's say you're not lying. Let's say it's true. Why are you telling me this? Do you want me to finish you right here? Because damn, I'm close to it. Nathan chuckled, and there was something bitter, almost friendly, in his laugh. Oh, believe me, I thought about it. But I'm not your enemy, Jacob. I'm an idiot like you. She deceived us both. I just want you to know who you live with." Jacob clenched his fists under the table. He wanted to get up and leave. I wanted to break that damn glass over Nathan's head. I wanted to call Emily and hear her say it was all a lie. But instead he asked, "How long ago?" Nathan leaned back in his chair, looking somewhere to the side, as if remembering. "A year and a half ago. We met in a hotel bar in Milwaukee. She was there for work. I had just moved to the city and worked as a manager in a logistics company. She came up to me and said that she was bored and that she hated being alone. We started talking. Then, well, you understand." "I don't understand," Jacob snapped. "Continue." "Okay," Nathan shrugged. "We started dating. She came every 2 weeks, saying that this was her schedule. I thought she was my girlfriend. I bought her flowers and took her to restaurants. She even stayed with me for the weekend. And then I found the ring." He asked what this nonsense was. At first she denied it, then admitted that she was married. She said that it was a difficult marriage, and that you almost broke up with her. "I left her that same day. I don't need someone else's, especially something like this." Jacob listened, and every muscle in his body tensed more and more. He recalled that Emily returned from business trips, brought him souvenirs, and talked about boring meetings. And then she went to bed with him as if nothing had happened. "Why should I believe you?" he asked finally. "Maybe you're just a psycho who wants to ruin my life." "Because I'm not the first," Nathan answered, looking into his eyes. "And apparently not the last. She's been playing this game for a long time, Jacob, and you and I are just pawns." Jacob ordered more whiskey. The waiter brought a bottle apparently. He realized that the evening would be long. They drank in silence until the jazz gave way to something faster, with drums that hit the nerves. Finally, Jacob spoke. "Do you know what's the funniest thing? She always gave me whiskey. Jack Daniels. She said it was my style." Nathan laughed loudly with a hint of hysteria. "Seriously? Me too. Only I thought that she chose it for me. Damn, did she buy it in bulk?" Jacob chuckled involuntarily. It was the first glimmer of humor of the evening, and it was damn needed. "And she called me my hero," he added, twirling the glass in his hands. "When I did some little things for her, repaired her laptop, or opened a jar of cucumbers." "Oh yeah," Nathan slapped his knee. "Is she writing the same script for everyone?" They drank more, and the tension began to subside, giving way to a strange mixture of anger and absurdity. "Yeah," Jacob finished his glass. "She's a champion multitasker. 2 cities, 2 men, one big lie." Nathan leaned closer, his voice quieter but firmer. "Listen, I didn't just call you. I want her to pay for this. Not with money, don't think so. But she must understand that she can't play with people like that." Jacob looked at him. The whiskey was buzzing in my head, but my mind remained clear. He still didn't fully believe it, but doubts grew like cracks in glass. "And what do you propose?" he asked. "Write her a letter? 'Dear Emily, your ex-lover and I decided that you are trash'?" Nathan grinned. "No, we will bring her to clean water. Together. Let's find out what she's hiding and give her a taste of her own medicine." Jacob was silent, looking into his empty glass. He thought about Emily, her smile, her voice, her lies. And for the first time that evening he nodded. "Okay, but if you set me up, I'll find you and put this." "Agreed," Nathan interrupted, raising his glass. "For the truth, brother." They clinked glasses, and the sound of glass echoed in the noise of the restaurant. Jacob left the Blue Haven at 10:30 p.m. with the whiskey still coursing through his veins. The cold April wind hit my face, driving away the remaining warmth of the restaurant. The street was almost empty, the tourists had left, and the locals were hurrying home. He put his hands in his coat pockets and walked to a car parked 2 blocks away. Footsteps echoed loudly on the sidewalk, mixing with the distant hum of cars and the occasional sound of horns. Nathan's voice echoed in my head. He got into his car, slamming the door harder than necessary. The key turned in the ignition, the engine began to purr, but Jacob did not move. He just sat, looking at the dark windshield where the lights of the headlights were reflected. The whiskey helped dull the initial shock, but now, in the silence of the car, the truth was beginning to seep through the cracks. Emily, hi Emily, with another man, a year and a half, Milwaukee, lie. Damn, he muttered, slamming his fist on the steering wheel. The pain in my knuckles was pleasant, real. He turned on the radio, but immediately turned it off. Some pop music about love was just annoying. He needed to go home. To her. But how? How will he look her in the eyes, knowing what he knows? Jacob pulled onto the highway, heading toward the suburbs. The road was familiar, he had driven along it hundreds of times, but now it seemed foreign. The headlights picked out pieces of asphalt, trees along the side of the road, and rare cars overtaking him. He drove slowly, as if he was delaying the moment when he would have to open the door of the house and pretend that everything was fine. Memories popped into his head, pieces of his life with Emily that he considered real. 7 years, 7 damn years of illusions. They met in their 3rd year at the University of Illinois. Jacob was then a lanky guy with disheveled hair and perpetual circles under his eyes from late-night cramming. Engineering was his passion, but it did not leave time for his personal life. He was sitting in the library, surrounded by mechanical textbooks, when she approached his desk. "Hey, do you mind if I sit here?" Emily asked, holding a stack of marketing books. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a high ponytail, and her blue eyes sparkled with challenge. "All the other tables are occupied, and you look like you're not biting." Jacob looked up, slightly taken aback. Girls rarely spoke to him first. He was the type who would rather be called to fix a printer than invited to a party. "Well, unless you're afraid of integrals," he replied, nodding at his notes. "They are everywhere here." She laughed loudly, without a hint of pretense, and plopped down on the chair opposite. "Integrals. Oh, I passed. I'm more about words than numbers. Emily Clark, by the way." "Jacob Miller," he said, holding out his hand. She shook it, and her palm was warm, slightly damp with nerves. She later admitted that she approached him to argue with her friend, but at that moment he did not know this. They started talking. Emily had a sharp tongue, with sarcasm that he appreciated. She said that she grew up in a small town in Indiana, dreamed of a big career, and hated boredom. Jacob told her about his love for cars and how he once took his father's lawnmower apart to understand how it worked. Towards the end of the evening, they were drinking coffee from the machine in the hall, and she said, "You're not as boring as you seem, Miller. Maybe we can go somewhere without textbooks, unless you make me write advertising slogans," he replied, and she laughed again. That's how it all started. Jacob turned onto his street, and the headlights illuminated a familiar house, 2 stories, with white siding and a neat lawn. The light in the living room was on. Emily was there. He turned off the engine and leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. Memories kept creeping into his head, like old photographs from an album he didn't want to open. They got married 4 years after graduation. Emily insisted on an outdoor ceremony in a park near Chicago, overlooking Lake Michigan. The day was sunny but windy, and her white dress fluttered like a sail. Jacob stood at the altar in a black suit, which he had to rent because he hated spending money on disposable clothes. "You'll be late for your own wedding," she teased when he almost got stuck in traffic on the way. "I already thought that you ran away." "I would run away if at least one woman knew how to cook your apple pie," he retorted, and the guests laughed. The ceremony was simple but warm. Emily looked happy, her eyes sparkled as she said yes, and then threw the bouquet straight into the crowd of girlfriends, shouting, "Catch it, losers!" Jacob then thought that she was ideal, beautiful, smart, with a character that did not let him relax. After the wedding, they danced to some old rock and roll, and she whispered in his ear, "You're stuck with me, Miller. No returns." "I'm not going to," he replied, pulling her closer. At that moment, he believed every word she said. Jacob opened his eyes, looking at the house. The light in the window flickered. Emily must have turned on the TV. He imagined her on the sofa, with a glass of wine, in the same white blouse. Damn actress. How could she look him in the eye after everything Nathan had said? a year and a half with another man, but he didn't notice anything. Not a single sign. The first years were good. They bought this house in the suburbs of Chicago, small but cozy, with a mortgage that the two of them took on. Jacob worked for an engineering firm, designing bridges and grumbling at his bosses. Emily got a job in a marketing company, started with small orders, but grew quickly. They spent the evenings together cooking dinner, arguing about what movie to watch, planning trips. One day, during their first winter in the house, Emily decided to bake cookies. The kitchen was a mess, flour on the floor, sugar in her hair, and the oven nearly burning because she forgot the timer. "Do you even realize that I'm an engineer, not a firefighter?" Jacob said, putting out a steaming rag in the sink. "Oh, come on," she replied, throwing a handful of flour at him. "This is called the creative process. Eat your cookies and shut up." The cookies were hard as a brick, but he ate 3 of them just to see her smile. Then she seemed real open, a little crazy, his. They laughed until their stomachs hurt, and then fell asleep on the couch listening to some stupid Christmas movie. Even in small things, she was impeccable. When he returned from work tired, she would put a plate of fried chicken in front of him and say, "Eat, my hero. Someone has to keep this world in order." "Are you talking about bridges or about your presentations?" he teased. "Both," she answered, winking. "We're a team, aren't we?" Team. The team she played for on the other side. He got out of the car. The cold penetrated the bones. Approaching the porch, he stopped, looking at the door. Behind her was Emily, his wife, his life, his illusion. He wanted to believe that it was a mistake, that the photographs were faked, that she couldn't do this to him. But unfortunately, reality slapped him in the face. Jacob opened the door. The living room was warm and smelled of wine and her perfume. Emily sat on the sofa, legs crossed, with the remote control in her hands. There was some kind of TV series on the screen. He heard a snippet of dialogue about a murder. She raised her head and smiled. "Oh, he's back. How did your business meeting go?" she asked, and there was not a shadow of falsehood in her voice. Damn actress. "Okay," he muttered, taking off his coat. "I'm just tired." "Poor thing," she said with feigned sympathy. "Come here, sit with me." Jacob looked at her. Her blue eyes sparkled like they did that day in the library. Her smile was the same as at the wedding, and not a single sign. No trembling in his voice, no nervous look. She was perfect. Too perfect. "I'm going to take a shower," he said, turning away. "Then I'll go to bed." "As you wish," she answered, shrugging her shoulders and returning to the TV. He walked up the stairs. In the bathroom, he turned on the water, stood under the hot jets, and closed his eyes. 7 years, and not a single hint that she could be someone else. Nathan was right, she played her role better than anyone, and he was a blind fool who believed every line. Jacob woke up feeling like someone had been hitting him over the head with a wrench all night. Whiskey with Nathan at the Blue Haven left an aftertaste not only in my mouth, but also in my thoughts. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the sun's rays streamed through the curtains. Emily was quietly snoring nearby, buried in a pillow. Her blonde hair was spread out like a halo, and her hand lay on the blanket as if she were an angel and not a damn liar. He stood up, trying not to wake her, and went down to the kitchen. Jacob poured himself a cup of coffee. Yesterday's conversation with Nathan was playing in my head like a broken record. He texted, "She's going to Milwaukee tomorrow. Business trip. Ready." His fingers trembled, but he pressed send. The answer came a couple of minutes later. "Oh, yes, brother. I signed up for this. I'll be her personal paparazzi. Maybe we'll shoot a couple of videos and make money on adult sites. Deceived men take revenge." Part 1. Jacob chuckled involuntarily. This Nathan was a psycho, but with a sense of humor. He replied, "You're crazy." Nathan wrote, "Calm down, director. I will make everything clean. Wait for news." Emily came down an hour later, wearing stupid owl pajamas and her hair all disheveled. She yawned, stretched, and threw her usual smile at him, the one that used to make his heart skip a beat, but now he wanted to break something heavy. "Good morning, my hero," she said, padding barefoot to the coffee pot. Why are you so gloomy? Did a client pester you yesterday? Jacob sat at the table, twirling his empty mug in his hands. He looked at her blue eyes, her dimples when she smiled, and thought, "You have no idea what I know." "I didn't get enough sleep," he muttered, looking away. "Poor thing," she said with feigned sympathy, pouring coffee. "Yesterday I finished watching that series. The killer is the secretary. Think what a bitch. I knew from the first episode." "Yeah," he nodded, forcing himself to sound normal. "You always guess right." "This is my talent," she winked, sitting down opposite. "What are you doing today?" "Work," he answered. "And you?" "Tomorrow in Milwaukee, as I told you," she said, taking a sip of coffee. 2 weeks. New client, presentations, everything as usual. Boredom is mortal, but money has no smell. Will you be bored? "Of course," he lied, looking into her eyes. She didn't look away. She didn't flinch. "And you?" "For you, yes," she answered, smiling wider. "But I'll bring you something cool." "That would be nice," he said, thinking about the bottle of Jack Daniels he and Nathan had finished. "You know what I love." "Oh, yes," she giggled, reaching out and squeezing his hand. "I know you too well, Miller." "And apparently I don't see you," Jacob thought, squeezing her fingers in response. Her skin was warm, and for a second he almost believed that she was the same Emily he had loved. Almost. The next day she left. Jacob stood on the porch as she loaded her suitcase into her Honda. The bag with the laptop was hanging on his shoulder. His hair was pulled back into a ponytail. She looked like the perfect businesswoman, confident, collected, and his wife. "Don't miss him too much," she said, kissing him on the cheek. "I'll be back in 2 weeks, all yours." "Good luck there," he replied, watching her get into the car. She waved to him through the window and drove off, turning the corner. Jacob took out his phone and texted Nathan. "She's on her way. Keep your eyes open." The answer came a minute later. Eyes, ears, and camera at the ready. "If she sneezes in the wrong direction, you will be the first to know. Wish me luck, brother." "Good luck, psycho," Jacob wrote, putting his phone away. He returned to the house, slamming the door. Silence hit my ears. Her scent of floral perfume with vanilla still hung in the air. The first message from Nathan came at 3:30 p.m. "She's in Milwaukee, stopped by the Hilton. So far alone, but looks like she's going to a party. Black dress, heels, you'd be stunned." By evening, Nathan sent a photo. Emily walked out of the hotel, laughing, next to some guy in a leather jacket. They walked to the restaurant across the street, and her hand lightly touched his elbow. Nathan wrote, "New player. Name is Tom. God, she has so many of them. Looks like she's a collector." He wrote, "Are you sure this isn't just a colleague?" Nathan responded, "A coworker who puts his arm around her waist? Well, if that's how you say hello in Chicago, I'm behind the times. They just went to the Rusty Anchor. Steaks and wine, $1 million romance." Jacob threw the phone on the couch and cursed out loud. "Fucking bitch." He texted Nathan, "Film everything you can. I want to know how deep she is in this shit." "Will do, boss," Nathan replied. 2 weeks dragged on like an eternity. Jacob went to work and solved important issues, preparing the ground. Nathan sent updates almost every day. Finally, she returned. The door opened and Emily burst in with a suitcase, leaving it at the threshold. "I'm home, honey," she shouted, kicking off her shoes. "Are you bored?" Jacob walked out of the living room, where he had been sitting on his phone, looking at the latest photo from Nathan, Emily, and Tom outside the hotel last night. He forced himself to smile. "I missed you," he said, hugging her. She pressed herself against him, smelling the same perfume, and sighed. "I'm tired as hell," she complained. "These clients are just animals. But I brought you a gift." She took a bottle of Jack Daniels out of her bag and handed it to him with a smile. "As always, your beloved." "Thank you," he replied, taking the bottle. He put it on the table and asked, "How was the trip?" "Oh, as usual," she said, plopping down on the sofa. presentations, coffee, running around. But I did it. How are you? Okay, he answered, looking into her eyes. I'll order pizza, she suggested, picking up the phone. Are we celebrating my return? Of course, he nodded, going into the bathroom. Jacob was driving down the highway into downtown Chicago. The morning was gray, the sky overcast, and light rain pattered on the windshield, smeared by the wipers. It had been 2 weeks since Emily had returned from Milwaukee, and 2 weeks since Jacob had gone from being a betrayed husband to a man who was going to fight back. Today, he went to see a lawyer. The divorce papers were ready. He received a call last night from Marilyn Cox, a lawyer whom a colleague at work recommended to him. Everything is signed, Jacob. Come in the morning and pick it up, she said in her dry, matter-of-fact voice. He nodded into the void, hung up, and lay awake all night, looking at the ceiling. Emily slept next to him as if nothing had happened, not even suspecting that he had already taken the first step towards erasing her from his life. During these 2 weeks, he did not sit idle. As an engineer, he was used to solving problems systematically, and divorce became just another project for him, cold, calculating, without emotions. And why cry he was unlucky, or he was simply mistaken, who knows what the problem is, that he got a wife rubbish. The first thing he did was finance. Their joint account at Chase Bank was his main headache. There were savings from 7 years of marriage, about $40,000, give or take. Emily had always said that money was their future together, but now he saw it only as her hypocrisy. He didn't take any risks. The day after she returned, he went to the bank and opened a new account in his name. Thank God, he had a habit of keeping part of his salary on his personal card, a small reserve that Emily did not know about for gifts, and indeed for a rainy day. He transferred half of the joint money, their $20,000, under the pretext of investing in a project at work. The bank swallowed it without question, and Emily didn't even notice. She was too busy with her work calls and TV shows. The house was his second trump card. He bought it before the wedding with money from the sale of his father's old apartment, so legally it was his property. Emily contributed her share of the renovations and furnishings, but the title remained with him. Jacob checked the documents again, called the real estate registry to make sure everything was clear. She couldn't lay claim to the house, and that gave him peace of mind. Let him take his clothes and go wherever he wants, to Milwaukee, to Tom, to hell with him. He didn't care. That's her problem. He parked in front of a law office on Lazel Street, a gray concrete monster with floor-to-ceiling windows. The rain picked up, and Jacob pulled up the hood of his jacket as he got out of the car. The street was buzzing, cars, signals, people with umbrellas rushing about their business. He walked into the hall, shaking water off his shoes, and took the elevator to the 8th floor. Marilyn's office was small but austere, a dark wooden desk, a filing cabinet, and a pair of hard-backed chairs. Marilyn herself sat at the table in a sharp gray suit, with short gray hair and a look that could pierce a wall. Jacob, she said without getting up, and nodded towards the chair. Sit down. Everything is ready. He sat down, feeling his jacket stick to his back from the rain. Marilyn opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers, neatly held together with a paperclip. Here are your divorce papers, she began, tapping the sheets with her finger. The division of property is minimal, considering that the house is yours. A joint account is different, but you said you've already transferred some of the money. That's smart. If she starts digging, we'll prove that you acted in your own best interests before filing. No surprises. She doesn't know, Jacob said, looking at the papers. He doesn't know yet. Marilyn chuckled, leaning back in her chair. They never know until they see the judge's signature. Are you sure you want to go all the way? We have a week to submit if you change your mind. Jacob shook his head. He thought about it every night. I'm sure, he replied. Let him take his clothes and leave. Okay, Marilyn nodded, extending her pen to him. Sign here and here. I'll file tomorrow if there aren't any objections. Jacob took the pen and signed it, 2 quick strokes, as if he were signing a drawing at work. This was the end of his marriage. He returned the documents, and Marilyn put them in a folder. Good luck, Miller, she said, looking into his eyes. and keep your head cool. She can put on a show when she finds out. I'm ready, he lied, standing up. He wasn't ready, but there was no choice. On the way home, the rain turned to downpour and the windshield wipers could barely cope. Jacob turned on the radio some old rock, Sweet Home Alabama, but turned it off after a minute. The music was annoying. He was thinking about finances. In addition to transferring money, he took a couple more steps. I closed my joint credit card. I told the bank that I had lost my card and ordered a new one just for myself. Emily didn't notice. She rarely used it, preferring cash. He also called his company and asked to transfer part of the bonuses to a personal account, bypassing the general one. Family circumstances, he explained to HR, and they didn't dig deeper. By the end of 2 weeks, he had protected almost everything he could. All that remained was to wait for her to find out. The house greeted him with silence. Emily was at work. Her business trip was over, and she was back to her office schedule in Chicago. Jacob threw his jacket on the rack and walked into the living room. A folder with copies of documents was in his bag. He hid it in a desk drawer under old drawings. Emily has never climbed there. He sat down on the sofa, staring at the empty TV. Here they watched movies, ate pizza, and laughed. Now it was just a house that would soon become his only. He took out his phone and texted Nathan. The documents are ready, collected from the lawyer. The answer came quickly, handsome. He wrote, I took mine. Clever, Nathan replied. Keep me posted, brother. If anything happens, I'm ready to film her hysteria. Emily returned in the evening, leaving her bag at the door. She looked tired, but happy. Her cheeks were flushed. Her hair was slightly disheveled from the wind. Hi, darling, she shouted, kicking off her shoes. It was a hell of a day, but I survived. Jacob came out of the kitchen where he was making coffee and nodded. Glad you're okay, he said, trying to sound normal. She came up and hugged him, pressing her cheek to his chest. Did you miss me? She asked, looking up. Her blue eyes sparkled as always. Of course, he lied, hugging her back. Her scent flowers and vanilla was so familiar that for a moment he doubted it. Maybe this is a mistake. Maybe Nathan is lying. But then I remembered the photo, Tom, her hand in his car, and the doubts went away. I'm hungry, she said, going to the refrigerator. Shall we order something? Or have you made your own signature soup? We'll order, he answered, looking at her back. She opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of water, and started chatting about work, some client, some presentation. He listened with half an ear, nodding, but was thinking about something else. The documents were in the box. They will be served tomorrow. And she stood here like a loving wife and didn't know a damn thing. You're kind of quiet, she said suddenly, turning around. Everything is fine. Tired, he answered, shrugging his shoulders. Job. Poor thing, she smiled, coming up and kissing him on the cheek. Go rest, I'll take care of dinner. He nodded and walked into the living room, leaving her in the kitchen. She turned on the music, some pop track, and started humming. Jacob sat on the couch, listening to her voice, and thought, You'll be singing another song soon, Emily. The morning in the Miller house began with the smell of coffee and the sound of bacon sizzling in a frying pan. Jacob stood at the stove, wearing an old gray t-shirt and jeans, flipping slices with a fork. It was drizzling outside the window, leaving streaks on the glass, and the radio on the windowsill was quietly playing some old blues. He didn't sleep almost all night. Thoughts about the divorce papers hidden in the desk drawer and the photo from Nathan haunted him. But today everything was ready. Today was a day of surprise. Emily came downstairs at 8:15, barefoot, wearing a long white t-shirt that barely covered her hips. Her blonde hair was disheveled from sleep, and her eyes were still slightly puffy. She yawned, stretched, and threw a sleepy smile at him. Good morning, chef, she said, walking over to the coffee pot. Have you decided to pamper me or just burn down the kitchen? Jacob chuckled without looking up from the frying pan. He placed the bacon on the plate, next to the scrambled eggs he had prepared earlier, and turned to her. I decided that you deserved a normal breakfast, he replied, putting the plate on the table. Sit down before it gets cold. Emily narrowed her eyes, but her smile widened. She poured herself some coffee, added a spoonful of sugar, and plopped down on a chair, pulling her legs under her. Wow, she said, looking at the food. Bacon, eggs, coffee. Are you sick? Or is this an apology for being like a zombie yesterday? Maybe both, he answered, sitting down opposite. He picked up his mug and took a sip, watching her over the edge. She looked so ordinary. It's as if Milwaukee, Tom, and Nathan didn't exist. As if she was still the Emily he loved. She took a bite of bacon, closing her eyes in pleasure. She drawled. You know how to cheer me up. What's next? Foot massage? Or do you just want me to stop grumbling all day? Jacob forced himself to smile. He put the mug down, leaned a little closer, and said, I have a surprise for you. Tonight we have a romantic dinner. Just you and me. Emily froze, fork in hand, her eyes widening. Then she slowly lowered her fork and looked at him as if she was trying to see if he was joking. Seriously, she asked, and there was so much joy in her voice that Jacob felt sick for a second. Romantic dinner? Did you come up with this yourself, or did someone suggest it? Myself, he lied, shrugging his shoulders. I thought that we haven't done anything like this for a long time. Steaks, wine, candles, everything you like. She clapped her hands like a girl and sat back in her chair, beaming. Oh my God, Jacob, you're the best, she said, standing up and walking around the table to hug him. She pressed herself close to him, clasping her neck with her arms, and kissed him on the cheek. I knew that you were my best. He hugged her back, feeling the warmth of her body through her thin t-shirt. Her smell flowers and vanilla hit his nose, and for a moment he almost forgot why he started all this. Almost. So you like the idea? He asked, pulling away and looking into her eyes. Like, she asked, returning to her chair. I'm delighted. It'll be like old times, right? Remember when we went to Lake Michigan and roasted meat over a fire? Just no mosquitoes, I hope. No mosquitoes, he nodded. I promise. She laughed as she took a sip of her coffee and started chatting about how it had been a while since they'd done something like this. Jacob listened with half an ear, nodding, but was thinking about something else. Emily finished her scrambled eggs, wiped her lips with a napkin, and stood up, stretching. Okay, my hero, she said with a wink. I have work today, but I'll be back by 6. She went upstairs, humming something under her breath, and Jacob was left alone. Meanwhile, Emily stood in front of the bedroom mirror, combing her hair. She smiled at her reflection, feeling warmth spreading inside her. Romantic dinner. Jacob hadn't done anything like that in 100 years, not since they'd gone to that stupid campsite 3 years ago, where he'd almost burned down the tent trying to start a fire. She loved it when he tried. It reminded her why she had chosen him, reliable, a little boring, but with a heart that knew how to surprise. She opened her closet and pulled out a black dress, something she'd bought in Milwaukee a couple of months ago, but hadn't yet worn at home. It was simple, but had a low cut back, just right for a night like this. I'll put it on, she thought, holding the dress to herself and spinning in front of the mirror. But then her gaze fell on the underwear drawer, and she bit her lip. The old lace sets she wore at home were, well, let's just say they weren't in the best condition. And for a romantic dinner, you need something special. We need to stop by the store, she muttered, throwing the dress on the bed. She imagined how after dinner she and Jacob would finish the wine, light the candles, and, well, who knows? A new set of lingerie black, spaghetti straps, maybe a touch of lace would be the perfect addition. She already saw herself in him, how she came out of the bathroom, and he looked at her, as in the first years, when he could not take his eyes off. Emily grabbed her phone and quickly typed a message to her friend, Kate. Jacob is having a romantic evening. Need advice on lingerie. Where can I get something hot before 6? Kate responded a minute later. Wow, good job for your engineer. Stop by Victoria's Secret on Michigan Avenue. Black garter said he'll blow it. Emily giggled as she put her phone away. Yes, that was what was needed. She came downstairs, already in jeans and a blouse, ready to work. Jacob stood at the sink, drying his hands with a towel. "I'm going," she said, putting on her shoes. "Don't forget about the candles, okay? And wine, red, you know." "I won't forget," he answered, looking at her. "Have a nice day." "You too," she winked, grabbing her bag and walking out the door. She got into the car, turned on the radio, and drove to the office, humming along to some pop track. Thoughts about the evening were spinning in my head. It will be perfect. Jacob, of course, is not a master of surprises, but when he tries, it is always touching. She didn't even notice how I was smiling the whole way. Jacob watched her Honda disappear around the bend and closed the door. He took out his phone and texted Nathan. Jacob stood at the stove, flipping steaks in a cast iron skillet. The aroma of roasting meat with rosemary and garlic filled the kitchen, mingling with the warm glow of the candles he had placed on the living room table. The table was set as in a restaurant: a white tablecloth, 2 glasses of wine, a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, her favorite, and the plates that they had bought at the crossroads on their first anniversary. He even turned on the music, soft jazz, the same one that was playing at the Blue Haven when Nathan turned his life upside down. The irony was not lost on him, but he pushed the thought aside. Today, everything must be perfect, at least in the beginning. Emily had gone to the bathroom half an hour ago, humming to herself while he finished cooking. She returned home at 6, as promised, with a mysterious smile and a bag of Victoria's Secret, which she quickly hid in the bedroom. "That's for later," she winked, and Jacob nodded, hiding the cold in his chest. He turned off the stove, placed the steaks on a wooden board to rest, and checked the potatoes in the oven golden and crispy. Everything was ready. Jacob took off his apron, tossed it on a chair, and straightened his shirt, a dark blue one with rolled-up sleeves that Emily had once called sexy. He didn't feel sexy. He felt like a soldier before a battle. The bathroom door opened and Emily came down the stairs. Jacob turned around and froze. She wore black lace lingerie with thin straps, a sheer bodice that showed off her curves, and garters that made her legs look endless. On top was a light silk robe, open so as not to hide the main thing. Her hair fell in waves over her shoulders, and her lips glistened with a scarlet sheen. It looked like a dream or a weapon, depending on which way you looked at it. "Well, honey," she said in a low, playful voice, stopping in the kitchen doorway, "how do you like my surprise?" Jacob swallowed. Even knowing everything he knew, he couldn't help but admit that she was damn good. But that didn't change the plan. He forced himself to smirk, crossing his arms. "You look like you're going to kill me," he said, "or seduce you to death. What of this?" She laughed as she walked closer, her bare feet making no noise on the wooden floor. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing close so that he could feel the warmth of her skin through his shirt. "Maybe it's both," she whispered, touching his neck with her lips. "Dinner can wait, right? I'm hungry in a completely different way." Her fingers slid to the buttons of his shirt, but Jacob gently grabbed her wrists, pulling her away with a smile that was difficult for him. "Hey, not so fast," he said, adding lightness to his voice. "First dinner, then sex. Let's stretch out the pleasure, work up an appetite." Emily pouted, but there was a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. She stepped back, straightening her robe, but not tying it. "Okay, you win," she said, crossing her arms, "but only because I love your steaks. And then you're mine, Miller." "Agreed," he nodded, turning to the table. His heart was pounding, but not from her proximity. He poured the wine into glasses, placed the steaks and potatoes on plates, and they sat down at the table. The candles flickered, casting shadows on her face, and jazz flowed from the speakers, creating the illusion of coziness. Emily raised her glass, clinking it against it. "For us," she said, smiling, "and for such evenings." "For us," he echoed, taking a sip. The wine was tart, with a hint of blackcurrant, but he could barely taste it. His gaze kept falling on the clock above the fireplace. 1945. Soon. She cut the steak, picked up a piece, and put it in her mouth, closing her eyes in pleasure. "God, Jacob," she said, swallowing. "You've outdone yourself. It's better than any restaurant." "I tried for you," he answered, and it was the truth. They ate, Chatting about trifles, she talked about a stupid client at work. He agreed and joked about his boss. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. And then the doorbell rang. Emily froze, fork in hand, and looked at him. "Are you waiting for someone?" she asked, frowning. "Maybe a neighbor," he shrugged, pushing back his chair. "Now we'll find out." "I'll open it," she said, getting up. "You sit." She went to the door, her robe fluttered, revealing the lace of her underwear. She never put on her dress. Jacob stood up next, slowly, feeling his pulse quicken. Emily turned the knob, opened the door, and her face turned white. There were two people standing on the threshold, Nathan and Tom. Both looked at her, and there was something in their eyes between contempt and curiosity. "Hey, Emily," Nathan said, crossing his arms. "How are you doing?" She opened her mouth, but the words stuck. Her gaze darted from Nathan to Tom, then back. She took a step back, her hand clutching the edge of her robe, trying to cover herself. Speechless, she stood there like a statue until Jacob came out from behind her. "Boys, don't be shy, come in," he said loudly with a sarcastic smile. "We're going to have a great party today." He took Emily by the arm, her skin was cold despite the warmth of the house, and led her to the table. She didn't resist, but her legs moved like a robot's. Nathan and Tom entered, closing the door. Nathan threw the coat on the hanger. Tom just stood there, looking around, as if he was in someone else's dream. "Sit down," Jacob said, seating Emily in a chair. She collapsed on top of him, still silent, her eyes empty. He turned to the guests. "What will you do? Wine, beer, Jack Daniels." Nathan laughed, short, sharp, like a gunshot. "Jack, of course," he said, sitting down opposite Emily. "You know how much I love your taste, Em." Tom chuckled, sitting down on a chair nearby. "I'm for beer," he said, looking at Emily. "This whiskey is already making me feel nauseous." Jacob walked into the kitchen and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and a couple cans of Bud Light from the refrigerator. He returned, put everything on the table, and sat down next to Emily. She finally raised her head, her voice trembling. "What? What's going on?" Nathan leaned forward, his gaze sharp as a blade. "What do you think, Emily?" he asked. "Or did you think that we wouldn't find out anything? That your little circus will go on forever?" She blinked, her lips trembling. Jacob looked at her, feeling everything boiling inside, but his voice remained cold. "Let me start," he said, looking into her eyes. "You lied to me for 7 years. How old are these guys? Year? 2? You told Nathan you were lonely because she's divorced, and to me that you go on business trips. Nice game, Em, but the circus is closing." Nathan nodded, sipping the whiskey straight from his throat. "A year and a half," he said. "Milwaukee, hotel, bars. You were my lonely girl until I found your ring. Do you remember how you yelled that I didn't understand your complicated life?" Tom coughed as he opened his beer. "And you sang to me about divorce," he added. 3 months, Emily. I thought we were building something real, and you just collected us like damn stickers." Emily clenched her fists, her face flushed, but she still tried to control herself. "It's not. I don't." She began, but her voice broke. "You don't understand." "Oh, we understand," Jacob interrupted, standing up. He walked to the bag lying by the sofa and pulled out a folder with documents. When he returned, he threw them on the table in front of her. "That's what I understand. Divorce. Signed. The house is mine, we'll split the money, but you better start packing your things. Today." She stared at the papers, her hands shaking. Then she looked up at him, and there was a mixture of horror and rage in them. "Jacob, you can't," she began, but he raised his hand. "I can," he said, "and I will. You lied to all of us. 2 cities, 3 men, 1 big lie. You have an hour, Emily. Get ready and leave." Nathan finished his whiskey. "That's beautifully said, brother," he nodded. "I would have been ruder, but you managed it anyway." Tom stood up, throwing the can into the trash. "I'll pass," he said, looking at Emily. "You're sick, you know. Goodbye." He left, slamming the door. Nathan remained, looking at Emily with contempt. She sat huddled, her robe sliding off her shoulder, revealing the lace that was now it looked pathetic. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. "Jacob," she whispered. "Please." "No," he snapped, looking down. "Time's up." He turned to Nathan. "Will you stay for steak?" "Well," he grinned, "it's a pity for something good to go to waste." Emily stood up, unsteadily, and walked towards the stairs. Her steps were heavy, as if she was carrying the whole world. Jacob stared after her, feeling empty. Emily stood at the foot of the stairs, her bare feet shaking on the cold wooden floor. Tears flowed down her cheeks, leaving dark trails of mascara, and the silk robe, which an hour ago seemed a symbol of temptation, now hung on her like a crumpled rag. Downstairs in the living room, Jacob and Nathan sat at the table, finishing their steaks and talking quietly. Their voices a low hum with occasional chuckles cut her like knives. It was all real, too real, and she couldn't believe that her world had collapsed in one evening. "It's an hour, Emily." Jacob's voice came from below, cold and hard. "Get ready." She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. I wanted to scream, rush at him, scratch out his eyes, but my legs wouldn't obey. She turned and slowly walked up the stairs, each step resounding in her chest like the blow of a hammer. The bedroom greeted her with silence. The bed, not yet made in the morning, smelled of their common sleep. Emily dropped to her knees by the closet, opened the doors, and began pulling things out. Her hands were shaking, her blouses and jeans fell to the floor, but she didn't stop. The suitcase, the same one she had taken to Milwaukee, lay in the corner. She pulled it over, clicked the locks, and began stuffing the clothes inside. "Goats," she muttered, throwing the dress into a pile. "All three. Damn goats." Her voice broke into a sob, and she wiped her face with the sleeve of her robe. Emily pulled out her bag from under the bed and threw in her cosmetics, phone, and charger. The suitcase would no longer close. She sat on it, pressing with her weight until the zipper gave way. Then she stood up and looked around the room. A photo of their wedding stood on the nightstand, she in a white dress, he in a stupid suit, both laughing. She grabbed the frame and wanted to throw it against the wall, but stopped. No. Let him stay. Let him look at her every day and eat himself for losing such a woman. With a suitcase in one hand and a bag over her shoulder, she went downstairs. Jacob and Nathan were still at the table. The steaks were gone, leaving only bones and potato peels on the plates. Nathan was holding a bottle of whiskey. Jacob was holding a glass with the rest of the wine. They fell silent when she entered and looked at her. There was no pity in their eyes, only coldness and something like tired triumph. "Leave the keys on the table," Jacob said without getting up. His voice was even, as if he was asking for salt. Emily tossed a set of keys onto the coffee table next to the sofa, and they jingled as they slid across the glass. She straightened up, clutching the handle of her suitcase. "You'll be sorry," she said, looking at him. Her voice trembled, but she tried to keep her face. "You will regret everything." "I already regret it," he replied, sipping his wine. 7 years, Emily. Leave." Nathan chuckled, twirling the bottle in his hands. "Bye, beauty," he said. "Take care in Milwaukee." She pursed her lips, turned around, and walked towards the door. The suitcase clattered with its wheels on the floor. The bag hit the thigh. She opened the door, stepped into the rain, and slammed it so hard the glass shook. The cold air hit her face. The rain immediately wet her sweater, but she didn't stop. Her car was parked at the curb. She got in, threw her things into the back seat, and started the engine. Her hands were shaking, tears made it difficult to see the road, but she pulled out into the street and drove away. Kate lived 10 minutes away, in a small apartment above a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. Emily parked awkwardly, taking up 2 spaces, and pulled out her suitcase in the rain. She walked up the narrow stairs, wheels clattering on the steps, and rang the doorbell. Kate opened it almost immediately, wearing cat pajama pants and a glass of wine in her hand. Her dark hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and there was a look of surprise on her face. She said, retreating. "What the hell? You're all wet. What's happened?" Emily stumbled inside, leaving her suitcase at the door. She collapsed on Kate's sofa, old, with faded upholstery, and burst into tears. Tears flowed freely. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. They're assholes, Kate, she managed between sobs. All three, Jacob, Nathan, Tom, they destroyed me. Kate put the glass on the table, grabbed a box of napkins, and sat down next to her, handing them to her friend. Wait, she said, frowning. Who is Nathan? And Tom, I thought you and Jacob were having a romantic dinner. You wrote about underwear. Where did three more come from? Emily took a napkin and wiped her face, but the tears did not stop. She sniffed and looked at Kate. Her eyes were red, full of pain and anger. It wasn't dinner, she said, clutching the napkin in her fist. It was a trap. He called them Nathan and Tom. They burst in while we were eating and they laid everything out. About Milwaukee, about my life there. Jacob knew. He knew everything and put on this show to humiliate me. Kate blinked, trying to comprehend. Wait, she said. Are you saying that you had other men, and Jacob found them? Yes, Emily shouted, jumping up from the couch. She began to pace around the room, her wet sweater leaving drops on the floor. Nathan is a guy from Milwaukee whom I dated a year and a half ago, but he left me when he found out that I was married. Tom is different. I started with him a couple of months ago. But it's not what they think, Kate. I'm not some woman of easy virtue. I was just filling the void. Kate raised her eyebrows as she leaned back on the couch. Did you fill the void? She asked again. Are you serious? You're married to Jacob. Why the hell were you even dating anyone? Emily stopped and turned to her, her face contorted with offense. Because I was alone, she said, hitting her chest. These business trips are 2 weeks there, 2 weeks at home. Jacob is always at work, always in his drawings. I missed you, Kate. I didn't want to leave him. I didn't want to break anything. Nathan and Tom, it was just. For a while, so as not to go crazy from loneliness. Kate shook her head, but remained silent. Emily collapsed back onto the couch, wrapping her arms around herself. And they didn't even let me explain, she continued, her voice trembling. They sat there, ate his damn steaks, drank whiskey, and made fun of me. Jacob laid out the divorce papers and told me to get out. Nathan called me pretty with such contempt as if I were trash. Tom just left, saying that I was sick. Goats, all three. She burst into tears again, burying herself in the pillow. Kate sighed and reached out and stroked her back. I don't know what to say, she began carefully. Do you really think they had no right to be angry? You lied to them all. I didn't deprive anyone, Emily shouted, raising her head. Jacob lived his life, I lived mine. Nathan and Tom didn't lose anything. I didn't take money from them. I didn't promise to get married. It was just temporary. Why couldn't they just talk? Why immediately humiliate me, drive me out like a dog? Kate poured her wine from her glass and handed it to her. Drink, she said. You're in complete shit, Em, but stay as long as you need. Emily took the glass, took a long sip, and stared at the wall. Her world had fallen apart, but she still clung to her truth. They didn't understand. They didn't want to understand, and she just wanted not to be alone. The door slammed behind Emily, and silence fell in the house, broken only by the quiet hiss of rain outside the window and muffled jazz from the speakers. Jacob stood at the table, looking at the empty chair where she had sat just half an hour ago in lacy lingerie, with a smile full of anticipation. Now there were only crumpled napkins and leftover potatoes lying there. Nathan sat opposite, twirling a bottle in his hands, and Tom, still standing at the door, looked like he wanted to fall through the ground. Okay, guys, Jacob said, sinking into a chair and picking up his glass of wine. That's the whole show. How do you like it? Tom coughed, rubbing his neck. His blonde hair was slightly disheveled, and his leather jacket was wet from the rain when he briefly stepped out onto the porch to breathe. Okay, guys, he said, looking between Jacob and Nathan. It's fun with you, but I have a ticket. I have to go. Good luck to you. Ticket? Nathan asked, raising an eyebrow. Where are you going on a night like this? Back to Milwaukee, Tom answered with a shrug. I have a train in an hour. I decided not to stay in this circus. And guess what? Now I will also be more careful with women. This Emily thing. Damn, that was an educational lesson. Jacob chuckled, taking a sip of his wine. There was more weariness in his voice than amusement. A lesson for three, he said. Welcome to the club, Tom. Tom nodded, glanced at the table at the remains of steaks, candles that were already burning out, and headed towards the door. Take care of yourself, man, Nathan called after him. And don't trust blondes on business trips. Tom laughed briefly, waved his hand, and left. The door closed, leaving Jacob and Nathan alone. The silence returned, but now it was different, not tense, but somehow exhausted, as if after a long battle. Jacob stood up, walked into the kitchen, and returned with a new bottle of Jack Daniels, the one Emily had brought back from her last trip. He placed it on the table, opened it, and poured himself and Nathan a full glass. Why are we drinking? Nathan asked, raising his glass. His beard glistened with drops of whiskey that he had not had time to wipe away. For the truth, Jacob replied, clinking glasses with him, and because we are not such idiots as she thought. Amen, brother, Nathan nodded, taking a long sip. He winced, but immediately relaxed, leaning back in his chair. Damn, it was evening. I thought she would start throwing plates, or at least yelling, and she just left. Quite weak for such a woman. Jacob shrugged, looking into his glass. The amber liquid reflected the light of the candles, and he suddenly remembered how Emily gave him this bottle with a smile. Your favorite, honey. Now it was just alcohol to drown out the emptiness. Maybe she realized she couldn't get away with it, he said. Or she simply had nothing to say. Come on, Nathan chuckled. She always had a tongue without bones. I remember how she sang to me about her complicated life when I found the ring, and I, a fool, almost didn't believe it. Jacob finished his glass and poured more. The whiskey burned my throat, but it was better than thinking about her tears as she left. He looked at Nathan, at his tired eyes, at the wrinkles that revealed more than he was saying. Tell me about yourself, Jacob said. You know my story. Who are you anyway, other than a deceived lover? Nathan grinned, twirling the glass in his hands. I, Nathan Crow, 41, is a manager at a logistics office in Milwaukee. Trucks, warehouses, all that boring stuff. Born in Iowa, where the only entertainment was scaring cows. I moved to the city about 10 years ago. I thought I'd find something better. Well, I found Emily. Great plan, right? Jacob smiled involuntarily. There was something simple, straightforward about Nathan that he liked. What about work? He asked. Like, they pay okay, Nathan shrugged, but I'm not one of those who lives for the office. Principles are important to me, you know. Honesty, word. If he said it, he did it. Emily broke it. I believed her, and she, well, you know. I know, Jacob nodded. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the whiskey soften the edges of his anger. I believed her too. Listen, he said, pouring more whiskey. She left us both like garbage, and we didn't even notice. Nathan nodded, taking a sip. She treated us like children. But you know what? I'm glad it's over. Principles are not just words. This is something worth holding on to. Jacob looked at him, and a thought flashed through his mind. He and Nathan looked alike. Not only externally dark hair, broad shoulders, but also internally. Both valued honesty, both fell for the same bait. Do you like fishing? He asked suddenly, surprised at his own question. Nathan raised his eyebrows, but grinned. I love it. Lake Michigan, fishing rod, beer the best there is. And you? Likewise, Jacob replied. I went with my father when I was little. Then I somehow abandoned it. Then let's go, Nathan said, slamming the table. You, me, a couple of fishing rods. Let's have a drink, fish, and forget this rubbish. What do you say? Jacob thought about it. The whiskey was buzzing in my head, but the idea sounded. Right, simple men's relaxation, no lies, no games. I agree, he said, raising his glass. Going fishing. For fishing, said Nathan, clinking glasses with him. And for more don't fall for blondes. They laughed loudly, drunkenly, and for the first time that evening it was sincere. The evening didn't end the way Jacob had planned, but maybe it was for the best. Emily spent the night with her friend Kate in a tiny apartment above a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. She couldn't sleep. Every half hour she jumped up from the narrow sofa that Kate had sacrificed for the night and turned on the table lamp, as if hoping that the light would drive away her thoughts. But even in the light, the emotions did not go away. Despair, hidden anger, and pain. Admitting this to herself turned out to be more difficult than she thought. Kate, waking up around 7 in the morning from rustling noises and quiet sobs, put a pot of coffee on the stove and called Emily into the kitchen, small but cozy, with a round table by the window overlooking the noisy street. Emily walked into the kitchen barefoot, wrapping herself in Kate's old sweater, which she had given her to replace her soaking wet clothes. There were dark circles under his eyes, and not a trace of lipstick remained on his lips. It was clear that the night had been an extremely terrible one. "Sit down," Kate said quietly, pouring coffee into 2 rough ceramic mugs. "You need to eat something, otherwise you won't last the whole day." "I don't want to," Emily answered in a shrunken voice. She was still blowing her nose into the paper napkins that lay piled high on the table. "I don't want anything." Kate placed the mug in front of her. Steam rose from the coffee, warm and aromatic. The smell of roasted beans was a little soothing. "What are you going to do next?" she asked carefully. "I have no idea," Emily sighed. She wrapped her hands around the mug, as if trying to keep warm. "I need to find housing. This is obvious. I can't hang around on your couch forever. And the suitcase that I grabbed is all that I have left of my things. But—" She fell silent, peering into the haze outside the window. Drops of rain flowed down from above, distorting the view of the street so that passers-by seemed like blurry silhouettes. "But," Kate repeated, sitting down opposite, "I don't have much money in the bank. Part of it is on a joint account with Jacob." She smiled wryly. "I don't want to sue, and it's pointless. The house is registered in his name. And to hire a lawyer. Kate, I'm afraid that he will take all this to the public if I resist. I don't need scandals. I could lose my job, my reputation. Look how easily he assembled a whole circus in our home." She bit her lip, remembering how Nathan and Tom stood on the threshold, and everything inside her was burning with shame and fear. Kate sighed briefly, took Emily's hand and squeezed it gently. "I won't say much," she said calmly, "but we both understand. You're really to blame for something." 3 men. "Well, that's too much, friend. You didn't initiate me into this before. I didn't even know that you had such a relationship on the side. I didn't fully understand what I was doing," Emily whispered, lowering her eyes. "It somehow all happened on its own. Work, loneliness, these endless business trips. I wanted attention, and I'm not a saint, I know. But I got carried away. Now it's like this." They were silent. "It's not just that it got carried away, Em," Kate continued cautiously. "Apparently, you have been having some internal problems for a long time. Sorry for minding my own business, but maybe you should see a psychologist. I know one specialist. She helped a friend of mine when she was getting divorced. She had similar things about, well, the need for male attention." Emily was silent for a long time, looking at the cooling coffee. Then she finally exhaled. "Perhaps you're right. Maybe I really am terribly confused." Kate nodded. She knew that her friend was proud and stubborn, and the fact that she at least listened to advice was already progress. "Look," Kate suggested, "stay with me for a few days until you find temporary housing, and I'll make an appointment for you to see a doctor. Of course, if you want." Emily nodded, wiping away another batch of tears. "Yes," she said dully. "It's better to pull yourself together now than to completely slide. And thank you, Kate. You are the only one left for me." Kate smiled and hugged her friend tightly by the shoulders. "Well, what are you talking about? I will always help. Just let's drink less and sleep more, okay? Otherwise, the psychologist will have to first save you from nervous exhaustion." 7 days passed, which flew by in some kind of foggy mode. Emily took time off from work under the pretext of a family emergency. She felt that she would not be able to function properly in the office. Fortunately, her immediate boss is an understanding woman who did not ask questions, but simply signed an application for 2 weeks. During this week, Emily managed to find a small studio for rent. Everything was modest. One room, a kitchenette, a small bathroom, but Emily felt at least somehow independent and not a parasite of a friend. On the day she first opened her temporary apartment with the key, the rain subsided and a faded sun peeked through the clouds. Emily took this as a good sign. She had not yet begun to deal with the official divorce papers, but several times she dialed the number of the lawyer who was recommended to her by the same Kate. The lawyer, a woman named Ruth Morgan, managed to briefly explain what could happen quickly under Illinois law. But official notifications and submission of documents will take some more time. If you want to sue Miss Miller, Ruth said over the phone, we can try to challenge the division of funds. But you must understand that your husband can raise questions of fidelity and bring witnesses. This could be bad for your reputation. Are you sure you want to go to court? Emily shuddered at the thought. She already felt trampled. I don't need public scandals, she whispered into the phone. If we can disperse quietly and peacefully, so be it. That's what they decided on. But the highlight of the week was a meeting with a psychologist, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Marion Bishop. Kate made an appointment for Emily and insisted that she go. Emily agreed, not really understanding what exactly she would say. Meanwhile, Jacob Miller had been waking up alone in his suburban home for several days in a row, and every minute spent without Emily was a strange mixture of relief and emptiness for him. On the one hand, he got rid of the constant lies that he had felt in recent months. On the other hand, the house seemed too quiet and spacious. At work, no one knew about his family drama, except for one colleague, the same one who recommended lawyer Marilyn Cox to him. She has already prepared divorce papers, which the judge has signed. All that remained was to wait for Emily's official notification, and that was it. The 7-year marriage officially ended. One day, when Jacob was returning from work in the evening, Marilyn called him. He parked his Ford Focus at the house and replied, "Hello? Hey, Jacob, this is Cox. Look, we're making progress here. Emily's representatives have agreed to the terms. It looks like she has no plans to sue. We can close the deal tomorrow." Jacob felt something tighten inside him. So soon? He understood that time was passing, but still. "Got it," he said into the phone. "What needs to be done? Come to the judge at 11 a.m. Everything will be explained to you, and you can sign everything. After that, that's it. The matter is closed." The lawyer's voice sounded businesslike and even. "If you have no questions, then see you tomorrow." He thanked him and hung up the call. Getting out of the car, I felt rare cold drops of rain falling on my cheeks. It's raining again, he thought bitterly. It seems that this April the city decided not to spare him. The next day, Jacob arrived at a small courthouse in downtown Chicago. It was a low gray building with columns at the entrance. The inside smelled of polished wood and cheap caffeine from a vending machine. In the corridor, at one of the doors, he noticed Marilyn, a fit woman with short gray hair in a formal jacket. Next to her, in the dimness of the corridor, stood two people apparently representatives of Emily. "Where is Emily herself?" he quietly asked the lawyer when he approached. "It'll do now," Marilyn answered, shrugging her shoulders. "Are you sure you want to see her in person? Usually couples in this state prefer not to intersect." "I don't care," he sighed, feeling a strange trembling inside. "If she wants to avoid the meeting, I don't mind." Marilyn just nodded and turned away, clarifying something in the documents. 10 minutes passed, and Emily appeared in the corridor. She was wearing a discreet jacket and trousers, no ostentatious jewelry, and her hair was pulled back into a neat bun. They made eye contact. Something broke inside Jacob, although he tried to keep his face cold. Memories mixed in my soul. Their first meeting in the library, their wedding by the lake, evening gatherings in the living room. "Hi," Emily said quietly, looking at him. "Hello," he answered just as quietly. They stood in silence, not knowing what to say. Then the office door opened and the assistant judge invited everyone inside. The procedure was almost formal. The judge, an elderly man with glasses on the tip of his nose, quickly went through the papers, checking with the parties whether they really agreed to the divorce and the terms. Emily nodded without looking up. Jacob confirmed. The judge declared the marriage dissolved. "Well," he said, taking off his glasses, "I'm sorry that it all turned out this way. I hope you retain at least something good in your memory. All the best." They went out into the corridor. The lawyers stepped aside to sign some formalities, leaving the former spouses alone. "That's all," Jacob managed. "Now we are nothing to each other." Emily squeezed her documents in her hands, and a wry smile appeared on her lips. "Don't tell me. So many years together. We cannot be nobody. Maybe we've just become strangers." "Yes," he nodded, smiling forcefully. "Emily, She looked up. There was so much sadness in her eyes that it suddenly hurt him. He wanted to say something sharp, "It's your own fault," but the words wouldn't come. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, lowering her eyes. "I know it's late, but just know that I'm very sorry." Jacob was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "I hope so," he said. "Goodbye, Em." Emily bit her lip but didn't say anything. Then she turned and walked towards the exit, her heels clicking on the old tile floor. So they said goodbye, without a scandal, without hysterics. Just a cold void pulsing between them. Marilyn walked up to Jacob and placed a folder on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" "Yes," he lied, looking at Emily's back as she walked away down the corridor. Now yes. So she was left alone with her demons. But now Emily had a plan. Therapy with Dr. Bishop, looking for a new job. She felt that she didn't want to stay at the old company for long, and she also promised herself to never lie again. The following months were like an obstacle course. Firstly, she cried almost every evening after sessions with a psychologist because she had to pull out all her fears and complexes. It turned out that her anxiety had its roots in childhood. Her father abandoned the family when she was 10, and she was still afraid of being abandoned again. You can't build a healthy relationship if you try to fill the void with deception. Emily grudgingly began to realize and accept it. She learned to talk through her feelings rather than run from them. When she was drawn to new acquaintances, just so as not to be alone, she stopped and asked, "Do I want a relationship now, or am I running away from myself?" She soon realized that she still found it difficult to be alone, but now she was at least aware of the reason. Dr. Bishop suggested writing a diary, writing down your emotions, desires, fears. Emily initially reacted to this with ridicule, but after a couple of weeks she noticed that when she poured out her experiences on paper, the need to urgently seek solace from casual partners decreased. However, Emily did not want to be completely alone. She felt that she liked sex, liked communication, liked being desired. It was part of her nature. It's just that now she decided to be crystal honest with any man she met. "I'm not looking for a serious relationship, and I certainly don't want to ruin someone's marriage. I'm just having a good time. If you have someone, sorry, goodbye. If not, let's try without mutual illusions." To her surprise, many agreed. Perhaps because she finally learned to speak directly, without lies and manipulation. Yes, it was a no-strings-attached relationship, but at least all parties knew the rules of the game. As for work, 6 months after the divorce, Emily still quit her marketing company. She found a smaller company closer to the center, where she got a job as a marketing manager, and everything went better there. Less business travel, more control over her schedule. Weeks and months passed like this. Sometimes at night, she thought of Jacob, especially when she saw happy married couples on the street, or when she found photographs from the past in her desk drawer. On such evenings, she cried, and then wrote in her diary, "It hurts me. I miss what we had." She did not remarry, and I didn't want to, at least at that time. Too much effort was spent trying to sort out my head and try to move on with my life without repeating previous mistakes. After that loud evening at the Miller house, Nathan Crow did not disappear from Jacob's life. On the contrary, they continued to communicate and even became friends, which surprised both of them. Maybe they were brought together by a common pain, a feeling that they had been deceived by the same lie. At first, they rarely called each other, exchanging short phrases. Nathan: "Well, how are you there? Isn't divorce too nerve-wracking?" Jacob: "Yes, so. The documents are almost ready. How are you?" Nathan: "I work, drink beer, and try to forget." Then spring came, and Nathan suggested. Nathan: "Listen, we were talking about fishing. Shall we go when it gets warmer? Lake Michigan awaits." Jacob was confused at first. Jacob: "I don't know. I'm not in the best mood." But then he remembered how, as a child, his father took him to the lake. There he first learned patience, sitting with a fishing rod on the shore, waiting for the fish to bite, and he decided that a change of scenery wouldn't hurt him. Jacob: "Okay, I persuaded you. Just no extremes, okay?" They chose a weekend when Nathan did not have urgent work at the logistics company and Jacob did not have urgent work at the engineering firm. We rented a small house on the outskirts of the lakeside area and threw beer, gear, and food there. The weather turned out to be cool but sunny. Nathan and Jacob sat on the boardwalk, their legs dangling in the water, their fishing rods outstretched, the wind ruffling the treetops. "Don't you think all this is somehow strange?" Nathan suddenly asked, watching the float move on the surface of the water. "What exactly?" Jacob clarified. "We could have been at each other's throats. And we sit there, drink beer, fish, and also joke about it all." Nathan grinned, glancing at his comrade. "Life, huh?" Jacob shrugged. "Perhaps this is the irony. We both suffered, and then we realized that we were not each other's enemies. Emily showed us all around, and, well, since this happened, it's better to become allies than to waste energy on enmity." Nathan shook his head, but with a smile. "It does you credit, brother. I thought you were going to break in when we were sitting at the Blue Haven." "I had some thoughts," Jacob admitted, "but then I realized what was the point. You are also deceived." They fell silent, listening to the sounds of nature. The birds chirped cheerfully about something, the wind ruffled their hair slightly. Later, they took the catch it turned out to be modest, and returned to the house, lit the grill, and fried the steaks they had bought the day before, remembering this whole crazy year with beer. "I'm glad it's over," Nathan said as the sun almost set. "This constant deception is like a thorn in the heel. Sooner or later, she won't let you walk." "I agree," Jacob nodded, leaning back in his wooden chair. "Now I'm free. I can live as I want, without suspicion, without anxiety. Of course, it hurts to lose what you believed in for 7 years, but it's better than living a lie." They clinked bottles, and the setting sun painted the lake in pinkish tones, which were reflected in the glass. Time passed. Jacob filed for divorce, divided the remaining obligations with Emily, and lived quietly in his home. He saw Nathan more often. Either they went fishing, or they simply met at a bar to drink beer and shoot balls at billiards. About a year after the divorce, Nathan began to develop a new love. He met a colleague at a logistics company, a girl named Lion, who was in charge of the marketing department. It's funny that it was the marketer again. Nathan first joked that the marketers are stalking me, but Lion turned out to be the complete opposite of Emily. One day, Nathan invited Jacob to a small party he was throwing at his apartment in Milwaukee. Jacob went, although he didn't really want to return to the city where it all began, but for the sake of his friend, he agreed. The party turned out to be intimate. Nathan, Lion, a couple of their mutual friends, and Jacob. No loud music or crowds. We sat at the table, ate pizza, and drank. Lion was a pretty brown-haired woman with an open smile and a quiet voice. She immediately hit it off with Jacob, asking about his work in engineering. "I've always admired those who do something real," she admitted as they stood on the balcony, watching the city lights. "Marketing, of course, is also important, but bridges that can support thousands of cars are much more useful." Jacob shrugged. "Any business has its own value. Take Nathan without his logistics. The goods would not have arrived on time, and then everything else would collapse. Lion smiled and nodded. He's really great. I like working with him. And not just work. A soft light flashed through her eyes. How long have you been friends? Not so long ago, he answered honestly, but a lot has passed. She tilted her head questioningly, but he didn't go into detail. He just added that he was happy for Nathan, who seemed to be finding true happiness. And so it turned out. A few months later, Nathan called Jacob and happily said, "Nathan, dude, I'm moving in with Lion. We decided that we'd stop wasting money on 2 apartments, and we'd have a great time together. It should be noted, how are you?" Jacob felt a strange joy and slight melancholy. Joy for a friend, sadness because I myself have never had anything similar. Jacob: "Cool, congratulations. Of course we will note it. Come to Chicago, or do you want me to come to you?" Nathan: "Come to us. Let's cook something, maybe a backyard barbecue." Unlike Nathan, who after this whole story quickly found his Lion, Jacob's personal life was in no hurry to improve. For some time he lived like a recluse, work, home, rare meetings with a friend, not because he didn't want company, but because the wound still hurt inside. He tried going on dates through apps, but every time, sitting at a bar opposite a stranger, he remembered Emily's eyes, her smile, her jokes. And although she betrayed him, his memory stubbornly returned those moments when they felt good. One day, Nathan, noticing that his friend was depressed, decided to have a direct conversation. "Old man," he began when they went fishing again. "Listen, maybe you also need some kind of therapeutic novel. It sounds crazy, but sometimes you just need to shake things up." Jacob sighed as he checked the hook on his fishing rod. "I'm not sure I'm ready. And I don't want to, without emotions. I already had this in my youth. One night stands, fun. And now I'm 38, soon to be 39. I want something different." "I understand," Nathan nodded, "but don't paint yourself into a corner. Otherwise, you will remain fixated on the past." Those words stuck in Jacob's head, and he mulled them over for weeks. In the end, he decided that he should at least try to be open to the world. Don't get involved in deception, don't run headlong, but calmly get to know people and communicate. Another 6 months passed like this. During this time, he tried to work on a personal project. He was building an old motorcycle in the garage that his cousin had given him. At the same time, I decided to improve my skills and enrolled in courses on designing city bridges using new materials. When he turned 40, Nathan, Lion, and some colleagues threw him a surprise party. The evening was friendly, in a small circle, in a bar with live music. There, Jacob accidentally met a woman named Ashley, who turned out to be a math teacher at a local school. They were brought together by a common interest, a love of numbers and logic. They started talking and exchanged numbers. Jacob developed a warm, pleasant relationship with Ashley. She was divorced and had a teenage daughter. At first, this scared Jacob a little. He didn't know how to communicate with the child. But Ashley was calm, reasonable, and she herself did not need vows for life after 2 years of recent divorce. "Let's just spend time together, get to know each other," she suggested when he admitted that he was afraid to get into new commitments too quickly. "I don't need you to save me or make me happy. I'm already happy, but I don't mind sharing it with someone." Jacob, laughing at her straightforwardness, agreed. They started seeing each other a couple of times a week, going to the cinema, to a cafe, and sometimes for walks by the lake. Ashley showed him that the world doesn't end after one betrayal. You can continue to live if you are not afraid to trust again. Another year and a half has passed since his 40th birthday. During all this time, Emily never reminded herself of herself. Jacob sometimes saw her name on social networks, but did not dare to visit the page. He knew that she lived somewhere in the city, went to a psychologist, worked in a new company, but did not want to get involved in the past anymore. They have not yet reached marriage with Ashley. As it turned out, both of them did not need this. They enjoyed what they had without trying to secure a formal status. "So far, everything is fine the way it is," Ashley said. And Jacob agreed. "Time will show." subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.